Good morning. Before we begin, we'd like to thank the ISN for the opportunity to speak to you all.
We'd also like to thank everyone at Fordham University, especially those in the Dorothy Day Center for Service and Justice, who really paved the way for us to be here.
In 2014, race is the elephant in the room. The perception in our society is that we are post-racial.
Our president is black. Colorblindness is the most politically correct attitude.
Hi, I'm Scarly.
And I'm Sarah.
We're juniors at Fordham University, and we're best friends.
We're here today to talk to you about race.
Race impacts every justice issue in one way or another.
It should be impossible to do any justice work without acknowledging racism, yet we all do it all the time.
Talking about racism is difficult because we don't know how to, and we're not supposed to talk about it.
For a while, neither of us even understood what racism was or how it was affecting our own lives.
As a person of color, Fordham was my first experience being at a predominantly white school. I really felt the weight of my skin color as I walked around campus and sat in classes. Hearing white students voice their fears about the Bronx made me feel really uneasy because the people in the Northwest Bronx community look like me and my family, so I identify with them. My white friends would often make comments that rubbed me the wrong way, like calling the music I listened to ghetto music. I often felt silenced in class because I was always one of 2 or 3 people of color. These comments and instances made me hyper-aware of my race. I started to notice the ways I was changing myself to belong at Fordham. Assimilating to a predominantly white school was really exhausting for me, and I felt isolated and othered, but I didn't have the language to really describe my experiences and feelings, and I didn't understand where these feelings were coming from.
As a white student coming to Fordham, I noticed race pretty quickly. Compared to my diverse high school in California, Fordham had hardly any racial diversity. Plus, the racial divide between Fordham and the Bronx was severe. Racial dynamics were present and palpable from the beginning of my college experience, but no one ever talked about them. I didn't talk about race with my friends or in my classes. The only mention of race at all was in coded terms. People referred to Bronx residents or locals using words like delinquent, uneducated, or ghetto. I was confused about why this stigma toward the Bronx was so strong, but I still walked faster and had my guard up when I was off campus. I was wondering why I was so ready to believe these messages, and I was looking for something to explain why the Bronx community looked so different from the Fordham campus and what was causing this disparity of resources between the inside and outside of the gates.
So when Sarah and I became friends, it was a huge relief for both of us to finally talk about race, to name this invisible force that had been among us this whole time.
In comparing our Fordham experiences, we found that they were completely different because of our racial identities. In classes where I felt encouraged and comfortable,
I felt silenced and invalidated. And while I felt like I had to have my guard up walking around on campus,
I felt at ease.
Articulating the differences in our experiences motivated us to name race and racism on Fordham's campus, to address it outside of just our conversations. But we were still stuck because we couldn't completely articulate everything that we were experiencing.
This year, we both did a 3-day workshop called Undoing Racism and Community Organizing, facilitated by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. This was a big turning point. The workshop taught us a coherent history of race in America, of how it was constructed to oppress, exploit, and divide people. It was a tool for understanding how racism affects individual people and society on a systemic level.
After the workshop, I finally had a language for everything I was experiencing. It was liberating to know that I'm not crazy, and there are words for what I'm feeling. I learned the term internalized racial inferiority, which refers to how I feel less than because I am a person of color. And I finally had a word for why I don't feel like what I have to say is valuable, and why I changed myself at school, and why I think so highly of white people, especially those who care about racism.
One of my big takeaways from the workshop was an understanding of my internalized racial superiority, which above all articulated why I felt like I was an exceptional white person for caring about racism. Before the workshop, I was helping people of color with their problem, but I realized how much I have lost because of racism. Racism is my problem. It doesn't just dehumanize people of color, it dehumanizes white people also.
As you can imagine, these dynamics play out in our friendship.
As a white person, I don't want to say the wrong thing because I don't want to hurt Scarlett or other people of color's feelings.
And as a person of color, I want to protect white people, including Sarah, from feeling any guilt or discomfort. So I'm tempted not to name my hurt.
We've realized that if we buy into these feelings, we're not being genuine with each other. And we cannot do anti-racist work if we aren't honest and authentic.
What I need from Sarah as my ally in this struggle is for her to really hear me when I name my experiences, and to listen wholeheartedly and sit with the discomfort.
In order for me to be an accountable ally, I need to know that when Scarlett calls me out, it comes from a place of love.
Our liberation is intertwined.
And we need each other in this fight.
Along with understanding how racism plays out in ourselves and in our relationship, the workshop also contextualized the systemic nature of the disparity of resources between the Bronx community and the Fordham community, and we saw more clearly how race is infused in systems.
This semester, we're organizing around police brutality. In our work, it is crucial for us to recognize that the criminal justice system disproportionately targets people of color, and to understand police brutality as a systemic racial justice issue.
America is sick with racism. We see the symptoms of this disease in every aspect of our society: wealth inequality, education disparities, mass incarceration, the criminalization of people of color, health disparities, and the list goes on.
If we talk about all these symptoms without naming racism as the root cause, sustainable change is impossible.
This semester, we've also been having weekly meetings with white students and students of color to talk about race and to brainstorm how we can bring the dialogue about racism to the Fordham community on a larger scale.
Even though these conversations can be challenging, they can also be really rewarding. There's so much to learn from listening to another's experience and from sharing your own.
So we invite all of you to consider the ways that racism plays out in your lives.
We encourage you to name racism in your conversations, reflections, and prayers this weekend about humane immigration reform, environmental justice, and U.S. relations with Central America.
We hope that you will bring the race conversation back to your campuses and communities.
Confront the elephant in the room.
Talk about race.
Break the silence.
So that we can authentically work for justice.
Thank you.